In this video I will show you how to replace the front lower ball joints in vehicles from 2006 to 2010. Park the car on a flat surface. Set the emergency brake and place blocks in front and behind the rear wheels. Raise the front of the vehicle using a hydraulic jack. Place 2 jack stands under the chassis for safety. Remove the lug nuts that secure the front wheel using an impact tool. Remove the 2 bolts holding the brake caliper with a ratchet and a 13mm socket. Secure the caliper with a piece of rope hanging it to the frame to prevent the caliper from pulling on the brake hose. Remove the brake caliper bracket by removing the 2 bolts holding it in place using a ratchet and an 18mm socket. Next, remove the brake disc by pulling it out with clean hands to avoid contaminating the braking surface. Remove the base that holds the brake line and ABS sensor cable to the stud using a ratchet and a 10mm socket. Disconnect the wire from the ABS sensor located on the fender using a flat blade screwdriver and pulling it out by hand at the same time. Remove the lock pin from the steering tie rod end using a pair of needle nose pliers. Next, remove the nut using a ratchet and a 19mm socket. Disconnect the steering tie rod end attached to the steering knuckle by prying it out with a bar and hitting the knuckle with a brass hammer near where the 2 parts meet. If possible, use a tie rod end puller. Remove the nut that holds the lower ball joint connected to the steering knuckle using a ratchet and a 21mm socket. Disconnect the lower control arm by prying it out with a pry bar, making sure that you don't damage the rubber boot, and striking the steering knuckle with a copper hammer near where the 2 parts meet. If possible, use a ball joint separator. Remove the nut that holds the upper control arm to the steering knuckle using a ratchet and an 18mm socket. Disconnect the upper control arm by using a bar, making sure that you don't damage the rubber boot, and hitting the steering knuckle with a brass hammer near where the 2 parts meet. If possible, use a ball joint separator. Remove the nut that holds the lower ball joint using a ratchet and a 21mm socket. Disconnect the control arm by prying it out with a bar, making sure that you don't damage the rubber boot, and hitting the steering knuckle with a copper hammer near where the 2 parts meet. And, if possible, use a ball joint separator. Remove the safety clip that holds the ball joint in place using snap ring pliers as shown in the image, or with a flat blade screwdriver. Remove the defective ball joint using a ball joint puller, placing it in the correct way as shown in the image. Install the new ball joint with the appropriate tool as shown in the image. Next, proceed to install the remaining components in the reverse order they were removed, making sure all nuts and bolts are tightened properly.